the news that Gerry Hutch was found not guilty by the Special Criminal Court of involvement in the murder at the Regency Hotel. Frank, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. I'm good, thanks.
It feels like, certainly in the commentary today, that people felt like this decision was coming, and yet at the same time, when it was announced, there was still sharp intakes of breath in the court.
Yeah, I suppose having covered all 52 days of the trial, having heard all of the evidence presented by Jonathan Dowdall and others through what was, a lengthy and complex trial, I felt that Gerry Hutch was unlikely to be convicted. I felt that the decision of the Special Criminal Court yesterday was the correct decision. I would have been very surprised if he was convicted on the back of the evidence, because to convict Gerry Hutch, the judges would have had to believe the evidence of Jonathan Dowdall, a self-confessed liar with a very serious criminal past, a man who was already serving a sentence, having admitted to being an accomplice in relation to what happened at the Regency Hotel back in February 2016. Now, the court could have, there is precedent where, the court can believe the words of somebody like Jonathan Dowdall. But in the end, they chose not to, at least not in isolation. They were not satisfied with the evidence presented by Jonathan Dowdall. And this, of course, relates to his claim that Gerry Hutch confessed his involvement, his direct involvement. Jonathan Dowdall told the trial just before Christmas that he met Gerry Hutch in a park in Whitehall just a few days after the Regency Hotel shooting. And he claimed that Gerry Hutch had confessed to him that he was one of two gunmen who shot David Byrne in the hotel a few days beforehand. This was flatly denied by Gerry Hutch, who said the meeting never took place. He denied any involvement in what happened at the Regency Hotel. And that was the specific allegation made by the prosecution, the specific case pursued by the prosecution. So when the judges didn't believe the testimony of Jonathan Dowdall, what they did next was they looked for independent evidence to corroborate, potentially support what he was saying. They were pointed to 10 hours of a secretly recorded conversation between Jonathan Dowdall and Gerry Hutch as they made their way to Northern Ireland to meet some Republican contacts of Jonathan Dowdall just a few weeks after the shooting. Unbeknownst to them, An Garda Síochána had bugged Jonathan Dowdall's Toyota Land Cruiser. All 10 hours of that conversation were played in court, and the prosecution pointed to a number of things that Gerry Hutch said during the course of that conversation that they claimed supported what Jonathan Dowdall was saying. But after giving it some very careful consideration, having listened to those hours and hours of secretly recorded audio, the judges were not satisfied that there was anything to corroborate what Jonathan Dowdall said to them just before Christmas. And in the end, as we all know by now, they decided to acquit Gerry Hutch of murder yesterday.
Was there a criticism, either implicit or explicit, in the judge's decision about the charge that was taken? Because it seemed to be there was some suggestion that that specific allegation by Jonathan Dowdall of the alleged confession that Gerry Hutch made to him in the park seemed to change the course of the investigation away from if they had accused Gerry Hutch of something else, they might have been more likely to have had a successful outcome.
I don't think it's correct or fair to say that the judge was critical of the way the trial was run by the Director of Public Prosecutions on behalf of the people of Ireland, because I suppose that's not their role. Their role as judges of the Special Criminal Court was to assess the facts of the case and to ultimately deliver judgment, in this case in relation to Gerry Hutch and the two others who were convicted of less serious offences. But she did mention a few things that suggested, I suppose, their thought process. And I thought it was very interesting when they eventually turned their attention to the ruling in relation to Gerry Hutch. And this wasn't until after lunch, until after the two co-accused were dealt with in the morning. And she started off by pointing out what the prosecution's case was against Gerry Hutch, and also, and maybe more importantly, what the case wasn't. And I thought that was very interesting. So she outlined again that the prosecution's case was that Gerry Hutch was an active participant, that he was actually there in the Regency Hotel, dressed in tactical gear, armed with an AK-47, and more than that, that he was one of two men who shot David Byrne in the reception area of the hotel. a very, very specific allegation. And I must say, I was taken aback when the prosecuting barrister opened his case back in October. We spoke about this on your show, and that was the first time that we got an indication as to what the specific allegation against Gerry Hutch was. Looking back, perhaps naively so, I thought that the case against Gerry Hutch was going to be that he was organising things from afar, that he was pulling the strings from afar. I never thought for one second that somebody like Gerry Hutch would have been in the Regency Hotel that day, armed with an AK-47, firing shots at an associate of the Kinahan cartel. But that was the case presented by the prosecution. That was the case that they had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And it seems that the evidence of Jonathan Dowdall was the cornerstone of that case presented by the prosecution, but he wasn't believed by the judges of the Special Criminal Court, as I say. And Ms. Justice Tara Burns said something else that was very interesting yesterday. She wondered what the case would have looked like if Jonathan Dowdall hadn't entered the equation, because you have to remember that the decision to charge Gerry Hutch with the murder of David Byrne was made long before Jonathan Dowdall agreed to testify against Gerry Hutch, long before he made a statement implicating Gerry Hutch in what happened at the Regency Hotel that day. So I think it is correct to say that at the 11th hour, the prosecution team seemed to change its tack. And on the opening day, back in October, as I say, we learned what their case was, that they were putting Gerry Hutch in the hotel, firing shots at David